Okay, so lecture 11. So we're going to record today for those that are missing. There should be lecture 9 should be up on YouTube for you. So the student said that your job to make up the lab is you're going to put some numbers on some black tags. So they put everything else away. So we'll pull those out, and in your neatest handwriting, we will put numbers on them to complete the set for next year. So whenever you get to it, I guess, no hurry. I assume you have things to catch up on before that we don't need those till next year. So when do you want to get it done? Okay. Do you know where to find all that stuff or not? Okay, so are you coming to, there's a Dairy Club meeting tomorrow at 1?
Yeah.
We can talk about it after.
Yeah.
So to make that up. So tomorrow's lab is in theory canceled. I think that's what we discussed. And then we're going to double up next week. So tomorrow, and you'll be all caught up with lab. So, and then we'll do 202s next week. Did you have any interest in going to the Dairy Challenge event? Okay, so we'll get that link out hopefully this afternoon. You got till the end of the week to file everything. So, any questions or concerns?
How much longer is it gonna be for a double lab?
Probably 4 hours till 6 o'clock. Does that work for you or not?
Time wise, yes. The availability of my brain, probably not.
Okay, we'll do what we can. There are a number of things we can do that get started on things that don't require some brain work. So, yeah, 4 hours of thinking can be a little strenuous. Okay, so I think we've mentioned this already, but the order can be important when we're treating an animal or injecting something into her udder. So the order is important. And we've talked about that we scrub towards us and then we put stuff in going away from us. So the idea is that we clean the teats coming back toward us, whichever direction that is. This is from the side, but from the front, or if we're doing a bit, parallel parlor, milking between the back legs, we'll start with the 4 teats and then move aft. In this case, you've got a diagonal there, so it's obvious which one is the most distant. So we don't, as we're treating those other teats or cleaning those teats, scrubbing, we don't get our arms on those teat ends. And then we prevent, if we keep them clean, then the first thing that goes in is a clean infusion tube, not our bacteria that we left and got pushed in by that infusion tube. So once we have our treating, again, trying to keep our arms, our hands away from those teat ends, we start with the closest one, and then we move away. So we're not forcing up. So when I was growing up, this is pretty much the only choice we had. You have the long infusion tube going in. Now we have these short ones that we only go halfway up the teat canal. And then if we, with some pressure, do a little bit of sealing kind of at the end, everything that we need goes in. So what is the purpose of this? We're trying to keep the keratin in the street canal. If we blow it out with that long tube, that plug of wax gets pushed up and out. That is no longer a barrier to infection. It's not a germicide, but a bacteriostat, which means that bacteria that get trapped in that stop growing. When they stop growing, that's the danger of the biological, the bacteria, their ability to grow and replicate. Even one can, if given the right circumstances, lead to trouble. Whereas,
Better to shorter.
yes. So we don't blow out that plug. Basically, we're only going halfway up. So maybe we're pushing the keratin halfway up, and then whatever we're injecting serpentines around it, it stays there. It takes a day or two for that to grow back. It gets sloughed off at milking, but completely destroying it will inhibit, or completely destroying it will allow bacteria to enter the teat end and get into the teat cistern, the gland cistern much more easily. So do we know why milk doesn't just run out of the teat ends most of the time? No. So you have all that milk up in the what? Not yet. So normally if we turn a glass upside down, right, the liquid runs out. If we take a straw and we stick it in and we lift it up, all the stuff will come out, right? But if we put our finger on the end, lift it up, that liquid stays in there. Why is that? There's capillary action there, and you have a vacuum created at the top. The weight of the liquid, as long as it stays in that column, will pull on it and eventually create enough vacuum that it won't let it fall. So if we take our finger off the straw, everything runs out. But milk doesn't run out of the teats. Well, you got pressure things, but milk doesn't run out of the udder for the same reason we have when we have a finger over the top of the straw. The liquid doesn't run out. There's no inlet, air inlet at the top. So we have to have the milk let down reflex. We have to have it squeezed out because it won't run out by itself. So there's no air inlet at the top to push everything or allow everything to equalize, and no vacuum to form to allow the milk to fall out down into the milking machine. So we've got the milk ejection reflex. We've alluded to it a couple times. The two parts are, as we've talked about, the nerve impulse going up to the brain. So that's instantaneous milliseconds to get that signal up to the brain. The hypothalamus sends a signal to the posterior pituitary, is connected to the posterior pituitary, releases oxytocin. That's got to go from the capillary bed to the veins, to the heart, to the lungs, to the heart, and then spread all over. So that minute to 2 minutes that we need for a good milk letdown is a function of oxytocin moving through the blood. Once oxytocin moves through the blood, it's going to squeeze those alveoli. Your myoepithelial cells around will shorten, and as they shorten, they will collapse that alveolus and then push all that milk down the duct system and towards the milking machine. So as we said, we'd like to have a strong milk letdown, which leads to an efficient and complete milk harvest. So efficient in the sense that's a short amount of time. We get things done in 5 minutes instead of 8 minutes. and we hopefully have all that milk coming down and being completely removed, more or less. We know milk is continually being added, continually being manufactured, so we're never going to get it all, but get enough there. So when do we attach? We've talked about this, that 1 to 2 minutes going through. So the question becomes, what is the first stimulation for milk ejection in our system? Whatever that may be. So up at the dairy, it's possibly the teat dip, but more likely the wiping of those teats with the towel. So we start the clock there, and then we want to attach in that 1 to 2 minutes after that wiping occurs. You'd either lose out on milk harvested or it's going to take longer.
So you think you can get the same output from both?
Well, if you
but it
put
might
you put the machine on, it's going to initiate a reflex, right? That
Mhm.
machine is going to stimulate the cow, and then you're going to get the big flow after 2 minutes. So you're going to get it eventually. It's just going to take longer to harvest. So if we do it normally in 5 to 6 minutes, it's going to spread out to probably 7 to 8. So, or if we take the machine off at 6, we're not going to get it all. If we let it milk out and get to the same endpoint of flow rate determines when the automatic takeoffs work. It's just going to take longer to get there. So the idea, if we can turn over our parlor 2 minutes per group faster, that's a significant savings across the day if we're running a parlor 24 hours a day. It's not going to make much difference. Up at the dairy, we're done in 2.5 hours. So if we do an extra 15 minutes or get done 15 minutes earlier, it's probably not going to influence your day. But if you have a parlor, the idea is that in order to use that capital asset most efficiently, I have to put more cows through it each day. So if I don't do a good job stimulating, getting that milk ejection reflex going the way it's supposed to, it's going to take me longer to milk each cow, and I won't have the throughput that I need. So I'm not using that asset, that milking parlor, as efficiently as I might. If I can only get 200 animals through in an 8-hour shift, which is kind of ridiculously low, but if I could get 400, I wouldn't have to get a second parlor. I could just have one parlor and get everything done. So that's an extreme example to illustrate the point, but you're probably going to get it all there. So we need patience and consistency. We talked about a routine that's different every time your cow comes in there. You go, what the hell's going on? That gives a little spark of adrenaline. That's going to slow the oxytocin reflex down, put competition in there. We need to have patience. We need to move at cow time if we can. That, not the Mountain Dew induced sale mode, right? Cows don't move that fast, so we need to be patient. We don't want to be kicking and screaming and hollering to get them to move faster. We want to design our system that allows them to go in a pace or movement that they need to go in. So patience and consistency. Cows like that sameness over and over again. So every time we go into milk, it should be the same exact experience. And they said that we're looking at 5 to 10% more milk if we get that strong letdown, get that consistent routine. If you go through and eject or inject oxytocin into a cow at the end of milking and harvest the milk that comes down, you'll get 10% more over the lactation. So it's a positive feedback system. The more I squeeze out, the more is going to be produced. As we get back pressure, we run into destruction of epithelial tissue, destruction of the secretory tissue. So oxytocin versus adrenaline or epinephrine, they are competitors at the same site. We also know epinephrine restricts blood flow to the skin, part of the flight or flight reflex. That's why we get cold and clammy on the skin. The skin, the mammary gland is part of the skin. So if we restrict the flow to the skin, we're restricting the flow to the mammary gland, and the more we restrict, the more likely we are to not have the nutrients necessary. So you've got an adrenal function that can be a nerve stimulation to that adrenal gland right in front of the kidney. That's going to be secreted about the same distance from as oxytocin. So if we scare the animal first before we stimulate her, odds are the distance traveled is the same. So epinephrine is going to get there and block oxytocin before it gets there. So it's going to inhibit that milk letdown reflex, that milk ejection reflex, inhibit that squeezing. So lots of different things there. So when we're talking about gentle cow handling, we're talking about the competition between oxytocin and adrenaline. Thinking about the person who's bringing the cows up, getting them out of the pen, and who's doing the milk harvesting, who's doing the milking of these cows, and how do the cows, especially on an individual basis, respond to the treatment they're getting. There's some cows, it probably doesn't matter what somebody does. There are other cows that are much more sensitive. So it's been suggested that any abuse, any roughness with the cows will hurt the dairy person more than the cow. I'm not sure anybody's actually quantified what that difference might be. But if you lost 10% on all of your cows, that would certainly be a significant financial impediment. I don't know what the damage or how we quantify the damage to the cow. So we want to move our animals at a slow pace, allow them to move through. So a lot of places will open the gates and allow the cows to filter out. And then we push at the end after we've cleaned all the stalls, bring up the rear. We'd like to keep the cows moving forward. If they turn around and look at us, we know that we're not handling them the way we should. So they're going to face whatever threat or whatever danger there is. So if they keep that slow, steady pace to the parlor, we're probably doing a better job than if we run into a bunch of cows running back toward us as we're moving those animals through. So trying to keep our animals moving on a steady pace. What do we know about those animals that are usually bringing up the rear in a group? Very friendly or not happy to walk, right? They're probably lame, right? That lame cow bringing up the thing there. So once that animal gets there, what do we know that she's probably going to be awash with? Things hurt. You're going to kick in that defense mechanism. She's probably not going to milk as well as she might, empty out as well as she might. Friendly cows shouldn't be a problem. So then through the process of milking, we got to make sure that everything is calm. They know what's going on. There's a lot of people that do that hand on the hock first before they touch the udder. So there's no surprises. Has anybody seen people that do that? Other people tend to sing or just let the cow be aware of where I am. I'm talking to them. I'm not surprising them. So letting them know where I am behind them. They can't necessarily see me, but they can hear me. So talking, touching helps promote that. There. Another thing that can be difficult is the exit. So just because we put our animals through and got the machine attached and detached, we might run into trouble. Now, up at Minor Institute, they had a real exit where the whatever section, you can sort of see that here. It lifts up, the animals move forward, and then it swings down behind them to kind of push them out. They had a lot of Canadian genetics in that herd. So these cows were right up at the pivot point on the quick release, which meant that for a lot of these animals, there's a kind of a sharp edge. You had a triangle kind of thing, your pivot point, another triangle that kind of gave it strength, also kind of moved the animals along. So if their head's out here, when this goes up, they move forward and this comes down to swing around. Now, because those animals were so tall and that pivot point was right there coming out like this one is, it's very difficult to get all the way forward before that part in the back comes down. So we're looking at, this is probably 5 feet in length here. So this was coming down and hitting them between the hooks and the pins. You got that sharp point coming down. You got animals that are kind of jumping forward to get out of the way of that. So if you didn't move fast enough, getting out from under that, it would come right down on their backbone, that point. So if they're thinking about that during the whole time I'm milking, oh my God, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. That's probably influencing the adrenaline and probably influencing milking. If I know that, yes, milking is probably a pleasant experience, but I know it's going to end with that point coming down on my ass and hit me right on the bone, especially when I'm mid lactation, I'm just skin and bones, to the point where there were some that their tail didn't work anymore because it'd been hit so many times. What? Nerve damage. Yeah. So you exiting, you're thinking about that. If she's thinking about that the whole time, that it's really going to hurt, especially those tall ones that had to kind of scrunch down and scoot forward as fast as they could to not get hit in the butt or on that tailbone. They're probably not going to be as thrilled about being milked. So thinking about things from a cow perspective, what is it like to be a cow on your farm? What is it like to be an animal in these stalls going through this milking system? And we hope that it's a pleasant experience all the way around. So we have bred these cows that they let down their milk pretty easy. Does anybody know how they have to like milk water buffalo and things like that? Usually they have to have the calf right there, because mom will only let down her milk if there's a calf present and thinks that the calf is doing the work. So there's a lot of places where you've got animals that aren't as far down the genetic selection. They're more wild cows that it's harder to get that milk ejection reflex. We have bred those animals to very quickly and very completely have that milk ejection reflex. Those wild cows, they're a little bit more ornery and they don't have that strong reflex to the practices that we use to harvest milk. They're only going to respond to their calf. There's some places where you've got a calf with a cow and you want to get that milk, you have to have that calf right next to the cow if you're going to get any sort of letdown. But we've bred those cows where letdown seems to come a little bit easier. So milking strategies versus tactics. So we're thinking about, does everybody know the difference between strategies and tactics? A strategy for milking, we want to milk well-stimulated, clean, dry teats. That's our strategy. That's the big picture, what we're trying to achieve. And then the tactics are, we use terry cloth towels, we use a certain motion to get those teats clean with the towels. We're going to do the timing that allows us to attach between 1 and 2 minutes. All the little things that allow us to achieve our strategies, to achieve that goal. So the actions that help us achieve the goal are the tactics. So we're going to use T-tip. We're going to leave it on there for 30 seconds. We're going to come through with a towel. We're going to make sure we do a twisting motion and make sure we wipe the ends as well. Once we do that, we're going to force strip and check for mastitis, blow out that plug, all those things. Anybody here milk in a tie stall operation where you're moving the units from cow to cow? So what's the challenge there? Keeping up with everything. There's so many different things happening. They're not in synchronization. And, well, I'm going to prep this cow because this cow over here is almost done. And then she's not almost done. So you prep that cow way in advance. You're probably going to have a delay. You're not pulling that milk out. So she's having hydraulics issues about trying to compress that milk with the myoepithelial cells. Milk liquids do not compress. If they have some place to go, they do, or they move forward, but they do not compress like we're thinking about hydraulics. So timing is an issue with the tie stall. So making sure that we treat that. And there are some people that have suggested that if we treat tie stalls perhaps just like we do a freestall system where we do a group of 4 cows, we have 4 machines, we prep them all in sequence, add them all in sequence, and then let them go through before we prep the next set. They might get done faster. Now, does that happen? I don't know. I've never tried it myself, but there are certain people who've said that works. If I can get these cows, if I attach things at the right time, I should be able to milk them out in 5 to 6 minutes. If I attach at the wrong time, I prep them too early, I prep them too late, it's going to take 7, 8 minutes. If I can time everything right, and that's the hard part with a tie stall, getting everything started at the same time and getting the machines off. So we treat all of the machines as individuals, moving from animal to animal, or do we treat them in sets? And there's some schools of thought that if we treat them in sets, we might get done milking faster. So how do we check our timing? What 2 things we have to worry about for our timing? So the timing of the prep, all the stages, and then coming back and making sure that we get our machines on at the right time, that 1 to 2 minutes after our wipe up the dairy. So making sure that happens. We also want to make sure our teat dip stays on long enough. Does it stay on for that 30 seconds? Do we get maximum killing of bacteria by keeping it on? We need 30 seconds to do that. Are we off or not off, as the case may be? So I'm checking our timing. So one of the things we can do is pull the M load report. This is printed out after every milking, or at least it used to be. I think they might have stopped that. But you can go in and look at command M load 3, M load 1, or M load 2. So the first one, I think, is M1 is the noon milking, 2 is the night, and then 3 is the morning milking. Kind of synced off of the when they pick up the milk. So the last milking before pickup is the third milking. So it's not in the same 24-hour clock. It's kind of shifted across what we consider days. So what can we do here to check our milking times to see if we're doing our prep work right? So especially our stimulation. So looking at the average time it takes to milk, so average duration. So we can either think about pounds per minute, but most of us, we think about start to finish time. So we're looking at this older one. Pen 1 used to be our high cows. So they're going to take a little bit longer. They're producing more milk. So we're looking at total milk from the pen. It takes longer to harvest more milk, whereas our pen 4 should be among our shortest. We get those on, we get those off. We've got certainly our sick pen 7 is still the same number. We're not producing as much milk per minute or total milk, so duration is shorter. Another thing we can check is down here, percent of the milk in the first 2 minutes. So if we look at our pens, we're looking at a hopefully 45. We're looking at 40% of that milk in the first 2 minutes. If we're catching that squeeze from that milk letdown, we should get the majority of our milk or most of that milk in the first 2 minutes. When we first started looking this up at the dairy, our benchmark was 50%. We changed inflations. They weren't nearly as aggressive. So better TDNs, things like that with those inflations, but we dropped from 50 as our benchmark to 40. I would say it's probably anywhere from 40 to 50. You might want to ask what the farm considers their benchmark. 40 is probably a minimum. So percent time in low flow, seconds in low flow. So how many pounds of milk in the first 2 minutes? That's pretty uniform. We get to the higher pens, maybe we can't get that much milk out or percentage wise in that first 2 minutes, but overall for the entire group, getting that out there. So checking how well we've stimulated, those are 2 numbers to look at. If you're looking at parlor efficiency, you're looking at cows per hour. Over, so if we're doing 16 animals per turn, so we're doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.5 turns, at least on this one, per hour. So it's not stellar. You're looking at the least 4. It'd be nice if you get 5. 6 is probably in the range that you're not going to get it done. So if you've got 6 turns per hour, how much time do you have to get the animals in, milked, and out? In a sense, but if I'm doing 6 turns per hour, how many minutes do I have? 10 minutes. That's going to be pretty tight if you're milking a group that's almost 7. and I need 2 minutes to prep. Getting them in and out is going to be a challenge. Whereas if I'm doing 4 turns an hour, I got 15 minutes per turn. I can fit these fairly easy in there. In fact, it shows that I'm spending the majority of time in the parlor, not milking. Almost half the time is idle. If you count for what minute, say 2 minutes for prep, and then you're averaging 5.5 minutes. That means half the time they're in the parlor, they're not doing anything. So if we can shorten that not doing anything time, there's an opportunity to speed up our turns per hour. So this gives you a feel. Has everybody seen this report before? If you go and you click on the graph function of the M load, it tells you which animals are where. So we've got one animal that's out of place here. So you're milking what, pen 1 first, and then that says it's in pen 15, so it hasn't been updated yet. That's the pre-fresh group. So another animal that's coded wrong or in the wrong location. We have animals that we reattached. So reattachment didn't do any different thing there. We got a little bit of milk out of that one. That one was probably worth reattaching going through. So we get a visual look at our animals and get a feel for, is there 1 or 2 animals that are slowing up the whole works? And this was on larger farms. If you start to take out that animal that takes 8 minutes and you have other animals that are done in 6, we take all those animals, we put them in one group, we can accelerate our turns per hour pretty dramatically. So if you've got a cow like this one here that's taking more than double some of the other animals, if we put all those long animals in one group and milk them at the same time, they're not slowing up the works for everybody else. Or if we're in a swing parlor or something like that, identifying those long milking animals and getting a machine on them first. So they're putting less of their milking time on in generating other cows' idle time. So getting them in, getting a machine on them, getting things taken care of. So we talked about the TDEN scores. This gives a feel for perhaps what our teat dip is doing from a moisturizing standpoint, how our machines are working, trying to stay away from those calluses. So intermammary pressure curves. Have you ever seen these before? I might have brought them up somewhere. I'm not sure I got to them in AMP with you guys or not. But this graph here, this relationship between udder pressure and secretion rates in dairy cattle, is one of those like 10 things you absolutely have to know about cows. So if we take the hours since last milking across the bottom there, and then we've got mammary pressure and secretion rate here. So this line going up is mammary pressure. So it's going to build, build, and build. It's not a lot of pressure per se. Does anybody know, like relatively speaking, how many millimeters of mercury there are kind of in the atmosphere and things like that?
Nothing.
We're dealing with, I think it's atmospheric pressure. I think it's 760 millimeters of mercury atmosphere, the weight down on there. So we're dealing with a fraction of that, maybe 10% of the atmospheric pressure. So the pressure as we go from milking drifts up and then it flattens out. Why does it flatten out?
Because of the secretion rate?
Secretion rate and what else? What do we know about the udder pressure?
Only have so much because there's no outlet.
You're gonna only have so much because eventually it's gonna start leaking out, right? There's only so much pressure that T10 can hold back. So you're gonna eventually kind of plateau out. So this is kind of maximum pressure, average secretion rate. So we know that in the first 12 hours after milking, we have the highest secretion rates. And then as that pressure goes up, we drop off in secretion rate. So what is the purpose of that eventually?
Sure.
To dry her off. We need to have enough back pressure for a long enough period of time to get secretion rate down to 0. So if we look, we got that principle, what shuts off? Milk secretion, and then in this diagram, what percentage of pressure keeps things going. So this explains, if you look at it closely, it also explains milking intervals and how they influence things. So why is this graph important? One, it talks about the milking interval and how that influences production. And it talks about how we shut milk production off. Yes.
So based off the graph, wouldn't it be like when people bag cows I bag goats for show, and then if you were to withhold past like 24 hours, say they've been holding their milk, wouldn't that just be an average decrease in production because they were in a process of drying off?
So they've done studies at World Expo. I probably should pull that out for you. Has anybody seen those? What bagging these cows does to them? And it's not horrible, but it's not particularly nice either. The edema that occurs in the udders and the flow of blood and things like that is definitely altered. So if you do not milk those animals for 24 hours to get them to have that big, robust udder, you're going to influence the production for the rest of the lactation. It's going to be something less than it would have been otherwise. So I guess I don't fully understand why we do that.
I don't either.
I know it looks right and all that stuff, but
Back here with the goats.
Mhm.
At Nationals, when I went in 2022, they made it a requirement and they checked. You had to milk your animals out at a specific time.
Okay.
So it was like whatever. So say it was like 11 hours before the start of the show, they would go around and check every single animal and make sure that you milk them all the way out. But they just changed the rule that you can now bag for as long as you want.
So the question becomes, is this inhumane or not doing this?
Yeah.
You know, it's uncomfortable. The cows don't like it. The goats don't like it.
Teeter back and forth. They start
They're very uncomfortable. They stand up. They're not laying down anymore because it's so uncomfortable, and they are depending on us to milk them out. And we bred them so they're producing so much more milk than they normally would for just their babies.
Mhm.
So
It's an interesting thing because I think it'd be a better judge of animal to see how much they can do and the actual amount of time that they're supposed to be back.
well, there's that, or the people that will, and I don't know if this is legal anymore, but people used to crazy glue the teat ends.
No, we tape sometimes.
So tape, do something that doesn't, and then you milk this one out because she's a little bit bigger on this side than this one. So you've stimulated the whole reflex. She's trying to get rid of that milk, and you've only taken a little bit out of 1/4. I don't think that's fair, but this is what we're doing. Everybody's looking for that competitive advantage. I know they ultrasound all the udders now because people were putting fillers in there, silicone, to fill in the gaps. If they didn't have a strong forudder attachment, they filled it in.
Huh.
So somebody got caught probably 10 years ago now. So they're ultrasounding all the udders to make sure that they're not putting stuff in. I don't know. So somebody somewhere, I don't know if it was at Expo or not, but the forerunner wasn't, it wasn't flush, it was kind of gapped. So they went through and filled in that gap.
Huh.
So,
So obsessive.
okay, so
Waste of money.
it depends on where you get your satisfaction in life. Being able to, and then also, are you an ends person or a means person? Do the ends, if I win, whatever I do to get there is justified. Because I want to be able to say, I got number one.
It feels so much better saying you got number one, just doing what you're supposed to do.
For you.
For you. I feel like
For not every, it should be, but as the phrase goes, people are fucked. So it's.
So much better just winning.
Yeah, so probably does in some portion of their brain in some way, shape, or form, but there are people that it doesn't matter what I have to do to win. I just want to win. I dated a young lady like that. She didn't care what she did or how she did it. All she wanted to do was win. She didn't care how she played, good or bad. What mattered is if the team won. And there's something to be said for that from a team, unit, working together as a unit. I was like, well, did I not fuck up? That's what I cared about. I didn't care too much if I win or lose. So the grad students had a team or whatever that played softball, and they needed more guys to get the job done. They had a bunch of girls. It's co-ed, and it's like, Mooney, come on and play. It's like, I'm not really that good, especially when it comes to catching. It's like, I can hit, I can't catch. So they said, we need bodies. Come on out. So okay, you were warned, right? I can't catch. I've never done that. I've never been in Little League or anything like that. I've never practiced. I can get to anything. I just am off enough that I usually miss it and it falls on the ground. But when it comes to hitting it, I can hit pretty well. And it was fun. They put me, the guy in charge, Tad, put me down in the batting order because, I wasn't as powerful as some of the other guys, but I got on base almost all the time. So I wasn't hitting home runs and stuff like that. So he put me down in the batting order, which means I was out in the field and right field there trying not to look humiliated. And they figured it out and they started hitting me stuff. And so I couldn't catch worth a shit and they knew it. So when I was walking up to the plate, you could see they were all moving in. And it's like, he doesn't know what he's doing. And it's like, okay, I played it. So I walked up there like I didn't know what I was doing and I held the bat funny and all that stuff. And they just kept coming in and the pitcher did, and I just almost took the pitcher's head off. It went over everybody's head and you got a running in the park home run or whatever it was. But, so just playing with somebody, it's like, okay, you want to be that way about it? We can play that way. But if I didn't do too much damage to the team, I felt okay, even if we didn't win, so ends justify the means. So we'll probably stop there and wait till everybody gets back and we'll talk about how this curve influences or tells us how to manage cows. So one of those important things you should have at the end of it, you should have a full page diagram in the back. So you've got the little one and you got the big one. I think you might even have two of them if you want to draw, because we're going to draw a lot of lines on them. So we'll talk to you tomorrow and we'll get done what needs to get done. But otherwise, we're not having lab tomorrow. So just check in with me at the meeting. I will try to remember to bring everything down so I can just hand it to you and you can do it wherever you want to. You don't have to run up to the dairy, a special trip or anything like that. So
Where is
it's in the other classroom, the back. I think it's in neck chains, but I probably find it a whole lot faster. I can find it a whole lot faster and I have to go up there to unless you're going up there today, I have to go up there to check on students if they did their dry matters and stuff. So
More than just collecting the data that we were supposed
you're
to.
supposed to fill in that chart and
Yeah.
then next week we'll show you how to use it.
Okay, so
Okay.
just collect all of the.
Fill in all the blanks.
Okay.
So you guys, there was a mixed bag of people knew how to summarize it and graph it. So we'll teach you how to summarize it and graph it next week.